October winds swept through the hills of northeastern Tennessee, carrying a chill that hinted at the coming winter. On a narrow dirt path, 23 villagers walked in single file toward the Harper farmhouse, their lanterns swaying and casting dancing shadows across the fallen leaves. The house, a modest limestone structure, had weathered decades of storms and neglect, yet its presence remained commanding, perched on a low rise with a darkened root cellar at its base. The mist clung to the earth, curling around their feet, softening the edges of the familiar landscape. A quiet tension threaded through the group, subtle but persistent, like the faint echo of a bell struck long ago. Inside, the farmhouse exuded an odd combination of warmth and foreboding. Timber beams, gnarled with age, stretched across the ceiling. The hearth roared, flames licking the surrounding walls, filling the space with amber light and the scent of burning oak. Lydia Harper, the homeowner, stood near the fire. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, swept over the gathering with an air of authority. Her voice, calm and measured, cut through the low murmur of introductions, commanding attention without effort. Guests smiled nervously at each other, uncertain whether Lydia's quiet control was reassuring or unnerving. Those who had known her for years understood that she had knowledge of things others did not, and that this knowledge was not always benign. The evening began with small talk, discussions of the harvest, the cool autumn air, and the approaching frost. Lantern light flickered across faces, casting shadows that moved independently of the people who created them. Some villagers noticed subtle anomalies, corners of the room darker than physics would allow, sounds of footsteps echoing where no one walked, but most attributed these to the house's age. A few, more sensitive to the unusual, felt a subtle pressure in their chest, as if the air itself were charged with something unseen. As the night deepened, Lydia led the group toward the cellar. The descent was narrow and steep, the air grew colder with each step. A faint tapping resonated from below, rhythmic and deliberate, though no source could be identified. Whispers flitted between villagers, eyes darting toward shadowed walls that seemed to shift under candlelight. The cellar itself was surprisingly large, its limestone walls etched with faint geometric carvings that seemed to shimmer when viewed out of the corner of the eye. The room smelled faintly of earth and something older, an aroma that seemed to pulse with history. Lanterns flickered violently as the villagers peered into the darkness, and an uneasy silence descended. Returning to the main floor, the group was quieter than when they had arrived. Conversation had died, replaced by a shared tension they could not articulate. Lydia's gaze lingered on each face, knowing, expectant. Something had begun that evening, something that would unravel lives and vanish people without trace. By sunrise, the farmhouse would no longer be merely a building. It would become a threshold, a space where the ordinary and the inexplicable collided. The villagers had stepped across an invisible line, and though none realized it yet, the Harper house was preparing to reveal the first of its enduring secrets. Morning light filtered weakly through the Harper farmhouse windows, but it seemed to hesitate, reluctant to illuminate the corners where shadows clung stubbornly. The villagers stirred, rubbing their eyes, whispering quietly about dreams that had lingered longer than sleep should allow. Some felt fatigue heavier than normal, as if the night itself had pressed on their bodies, leaving a residual weight that would not lift. Lydia Harper moved among them, her presence quiet yet magnetic, guiding the day's activities with subtle gestures and barely audible instructions. By mid-morning, tensions became palpable. Guests began to notice small anomalies, objects slightly out of place from where they remembered leaving them, faint scratching sounds from beneath the floorboards, and an almost imperceptible vibration in the limestone walls of the cellar. Conversations faltered, and some villagers avoided eye contact, sensing that something fundamental about the house was shifting. Several reported glimpses of shapes moving across hallways, fleeting but unmistakable, vanishing whenever approached directly. These movements were dismissed by most as tricks of candlelight or imagination, but unease continued to grow. Late morning brought the first disappearances. Nathaniel Carr, a farmer known for his practical mind and steady nerves, excused himself to fetch water from the cellar, ostensibly to prepare tea. He descended the stairs, his boots echoing against stone, and for a moment, all was silent. When the other villagers checked on him minutes later, he was gone. The door to the cellar remained closed. No sound of his passage, no indication of movement through the house. Panic spread quickly. Doors were locked, rooms inspected, and the entire perimeter of the farmhouse searched, yet no trace of Nathaniel could be found. His absence left a tangible void, an almost physical emptiness. that pressed on those remaining. By noon, 3 more villagers had vanished under similarly baffling circumstances. Some were last seen near the root cellar, others had lingered in the upper rooms, performing ordinary tasks. All simply disappeared, leaving belongings untouched, chairs unturned, and personal effects exactly where they had been moments before. Whispers of dread escalated into outright fear. A sense of unreality gripped the group. The house itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly, warping perception and challenging the villagers' understanding of space and time. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the air carried a faint, low hum that was felt more than heard, vibrating through bones rather than ears. Attempts to flee proved confounding. Hallways seemed to twist unexpectedly. Doors that had once led outside now opened onto dim, familiar rooms that should have been elsewhere. Even the most rational villagers felt themselves caught in a loop, compelled to return repeatedly to the central hallway or the root cellar, regardless of which exit they attempted. Murmurs of Lydia Harper's name spread uneasily. Some claimed she had knowledge of the vanishings, though her expression remained calm and inscrutable, her eyes dark pools reflecting a truth no one could articulate. By the end of the second day, 14 of the 23 villagers had vanished without trace. Those who remained were paralyzed with fear, clinging to one another for reassurance. Sleep became impossible. Consciousness seemed to stretch and contract unnaturally. Every knock, creak, or whisper within the farmhouse was interpreted as a harbinger of disappearance. And through it all, Lydia Harper moved quietly, almost serenely, as if conducting some ritual beyond comprehension. Her presence a reminder that the Harper house was no longer simply a structure, but a living agent of an unfolding, inexorable event. In the years following the Harper disappearances, the farmhouse stood as a silent witness to events no one could fully explain. Neighbors whispered about strange lights flickering in the windows on moonless nights, a rhythmic tapping echoing from the earth beneath the foundation, and shadows that moved independently of their sources. Even as the structure began to decay under decades of Tennessee weather, the air surrounding it remained unnaturally still. Birds avoided the trees nearby, insects seemed to vanish, and animals approaching the site often recoiled or fled without apparent cause. Local authorities attempted to catalogue the events, though their reports were sparse and often contradictory. Sheriff James Wilkerson, a man of practical mind and unquestioned courage, conducted his first inspection in 1872. He found nothing immediately tangible, no hidden chambers, no evidence of foul play, but described an unsettling sensation of being watched and a wrongness in the air, as if the ground itself were hollowed by unseen hands. Wilkerson's notes, later buried in county archives, hinted at something ancient and purposeful influencing the property, but lacking physical evidence, his observations were largely dismissed. Folklore began to weave itself around the Harper site. Stories circulated of a woman in 19th-century dress appearing to travelers at the edge of the property, standing motionless before vanishing without a trace. Some claimed she mimicked the expressions of onlookers, but inhumanly, her smile unsettling, a distorted echo of humanity. Farmers reported tools and livestock mysteriously missing or displaced, always returning in odd formations, as if someone, or something, was rehearsing patterns underground. The name Lydia Harper became synonymous with both tragedy and uncanny power. Her disappearance, rather than ending the story, seemed to cement the farmhouse's reputation as a threshold to forces beyond ordinary comprehension. Occasional academic attention emerged, though none dared delve too deeply. Historian Samuel Eddings visited in 1886, chronicling local testimonies in a privately circulated manuscript. He noted the prevalence of disorientation experienced by those who ventured near the property, recounting stories of villagers becoming lost within mere yards of familiar paths. Eddings described rhythmic underground sounds, knocking or tapping, that could not be attributed to animals or wind. His work, though thorough, remained largely unknown until rediscovered decades later, hinting that the Harper property had influenced generations long before modern investigators arrived. By the end of the 19th century, the Harper house had become a locus for cautionary tales. Parents warned children to avoid the area, travelers circumvented the property entirely, yet curiosity drew a few brave or foolish souls. Most reported nothing overtly terrifying, but a sense of unease persisted, described as vertigo, nausea, and an almost tangible tug pulling at the mind. The property seemed to react to human presence, to detect observers, and to adjust reality around them subtly, warping space and perception in ways that could not be measured with the tools of the time. Even as the farmhouse deteriorated, folklore ensured it remained alive in collective memory. By the 1890s, stories of vanishing livestock, sudden gusts of icy wind indoors, and shadows moving independently circulated widely enough to reach scholars in nearby counties. The Harper house had transformed from a site of tragedy to a living myth, its presence an invisible thread binding history, fear, and mystery into a single persistent enigma. By the late 1960s, the Harper property had faded from local gossip into obscurity, yet its legend persisted in obscure historical journals and academic whispers. Dr. Robert Thorne, a determined archaeologist with a penchant for investigating enigmatic sites, became the first serious researcher to confront the mystery in nearly a century. Known for his meticulous methodology and academic rigor, Thorne sought not only to document the farmhouse, but to understand the historical phenomena surrounding Lydia Harper and the unexplained disappearances of 1869. Thorne obtained official permission from Carter County authorities for a limited survey, arriving on August 14, 1969, accompanied by two graduate assistants, Michael Chen and Sarah Duval. From the outset, the Harper house presented a paradox, visibly dilapidated yet oddly preserved in aspects that defied natural decay. The roof sagged and sections of walls bore water stains, yet the root cellar remained structurally perfect, its limestone walls solid and dry, and the packed earth floor untouched despite a century of neglect. Even in daylight, the atmosphere exuded a palpable heaviness. Duval's journal captured the team's unease. The house seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. There is an oppressive stillness that grows heavier as we move through its halls. Over 3 days, Thorne's team conducted surface surveys, measurements, and photography, documenting the site with a combination of scientific precision and creeping apprehension. On August 16th, Thorne decided to explore the root cellar despite warnings from his assistants. The cellar's integrity astounded him, but what he discovered etched unease into his careful notes. Carved symbols faintly visible on the limestone walls, geometric patterns identical to diagrams found in Lydia Harper's grimoire. The cellar also produced unusual physical effects. Thorne described a sudden, intense vertigo in a specific spot at the center, accompanied by auditory hallucinations, knocking sounds precisely matching 1869 testimonies, though invisible to his companions. By evening, he resolved to remain overnight alone in the house, claiming that to understand the past fully, he needed to experience it directly. Chen and Duval reluctantly left, expecting his return the next morning. Thorne never returned. His absence prompted a search involving police and volunteers, revealing only his abandoned vehicle and camping equipment. The last evidence of his presence was a tape recorder in the cellar, containing his voice describing the initial survey, followed by erratic speech as he reported unseen presences, moving walls, and finally, the direct invocation of Lydia Harper. The final segment recorded distressing sounds, dragging, impact, and then silence, suggesting a violent or incomprehensible conclusion. The official explanation posited that Thorne had suffered a psychological break, wandering into the surrounding woods and succumbing to exposure. Yet colleagues and family rejected this, noting the consistency of the cellar's anomalies, the symbol's precise historical alignment, and the strange occurrences that preceded his disappearance. Thorne's work, confiscated and partially restricted, laid the foundation for future investigations, providing evidence that the Harper property was far more than a dilapidated farmhouse. It was a locus of persistent, inexplicable phenomena stretching across generations. The disappearance of Dr. Robert Thorne in August 1969 marked the beginning of a new, more modern chapter in the Harper mystery, one that would bridge historical accounts with first-hand evidence of the unexplained. Following Thorne's failure to return to Elizabethton on the morning of August the 17th, his graduate assistants, Michael Chen and Sarah Duval, returned to the property accompanied by local law enforcement. They found the Harper house unchanged, yet ominously silent. Thorne's vehicle remained where he had left it. His camping equipment was neatly arranged in the main room, and a flashlight lay on the floor, switched on with its battery dead. There was no trace of Thorne himself, and no indication of a struggle. Among the most compelling pieces of evidence recovered was Thorne's tape recorder, left in the root cellar. The first 30 minutes captured methodical notes, measurements, observations, and documentation of the cellar's perfectly preserved state. His calm, professional tone conveyed scientific detachment, but a sudden shift occurred at the 30-minute mark. Thorne's voice returned, now tense, reporting the presence of another entity. He descended stairs to investigate the source, after which the recording captured a series of sounds, 3 minutes of silence, irregular rhythmic knocking resembling a heartbeat, and escalating signs of disorientation. His final words described moving walls, voices, and an unmistakable recognition of Lydia Harper herself. Audio forensic analysis by the FBI in late 1969 confirmed anomalies. Spectral examination of the tape revealed overlapping voices that could not be attributed to natural phenomena or recording artifacts. No clear words could be distinguished, yet the patterns indicated multiple presences in the cellar. The recording ended with screaming, dragging sounds and heavy impact, followed by 4 minutes of sighs. Lengths before the device shut off automatically. Despite extensive searches, Thorne's body was never recovered, deepening the mystery. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation officially concluded that Thorne had likely experienced a psychological break, wandering into the woods and succumbing to exposure or accident. His family and colleagues, however, found this explanation insufficient. Thorne's meticulous notes, photographs of the carved symbols, and the tape itself suggested a phenomenon that defied conventional scientific understanding. Authorities acted swiftly to prevent further incidents. By September 30, 1969, a chain-link fence surrounded the Harper property, and warning signs prohibited trespassing. The house was boarded and locked, though no demolition occurred. Thorne's research materials were confiscated from Vanderbilt University, placed under restricted access, and added to a secure collection alongside the Harper grimoire. Colleagues like Dr. Patricia Morrison attempted to continue Thorne's work, but their access was heavily limited by law enforcement oversight, reflecting the official determination to control information surrounding the site. Thorne's disappearance left a chilling precedent. Serious investigation of the Harper property carried tangible danger. The tape not only documented anomalies, but also hinted at an ongoing, active phenomenon within the root cellar. It established a template repeated across subsequent decades. Those who approached the site with intent to study it closely often faced psychological distress, disorientation, or disappearance. Thorne became the first in a line of investigators whose fates underscored the enduring and hazardous nature of the Harper mystery. In the wake of Dr. Thorne's disappearance, the Harper case became increasingly entangled with institutional control and secrecy. Access to primary materials was severely restricted, reflecting authorities' concern over both public safety and the potentially dangerous knowledge contained in Thorne's findings. In early 1970, Dr. Patricia Morrison, a colleague and historian at Vanderbilt University, petitioned state archivists to review the materials Thorne had collected, including photographs of the root cellar, detailed notes on structural observations, and Thorne's photographs of the carved symbols resembling diagrams from Lydia Harper's grimoire. Despite her formal academic credentials, Morrison was denied access. Her requests postponed due to pending legal review associated with ongoing investigations. Undeterred, Morrison pursued multiple avenues. She submitted letters emphasizing the historical and scholarly significance of Thorne's research, enlisted support from the American Historical Association, and highlighted the need for proper documentation of an unresolved historical mystery. After nearly a year of appeals, limited access was granted in March 1971. Morrison could consult Thorne's research notes and photographs, though she remained barred from handling the original grimoire and related restricted documents. Her efforts reflected both determination and the extraordinary barriers erected by authorities seeking to suppress further scrutiny of the Harper site. Morrison's subsequent analysis, published in a limited circulation academic journal in June 1971, advanced the argument that Thorne had uncovered evidence suggesting a genuine historical anomaly. She concluded that conventional explanations, psychological instability, misperception, or criminal activity could not fully account for either the events of 1869 or Thorne's disappearance. Morrison cautious. Bly framed her conclusions within scholarly language, yet the implications were unmistakable. The Harper phenomenon represented an ongoing, potentially active force. Her involvement also underscored the personal risk associated with proximity to the Harper site. In April 1972, Morrison herself vanished under mysterious circumstances. According to public records, her vehicle was discovered parked at a rest stop approximately 30 miles from Elizabethton, but she was never seen again. Though media coverage was minimal, those familiar with her research immediately recognized the grim parallel with Thorne's fate. No official connection was acknowledged, but the timing suggested a chilling continuity. Those who pursued the Harper mystery faced genuine danger. In addition to Morrison's disappearance, authorities acted to physically erase the Harper house. After a fire on December 31, 1971, officially attributed to vagrants but widely questioned, the remnants of the structure were demolished in early 1972. The root cellar was filled with concrete and rubble, and the grounds were leveled and seeded with grass. County records indicate this was done to eliminate a public hazard, yet the destruction coincided with the increasing suppression of archival material, suggesting a broader intent to prevent further investigation. The period between 1970 and 1972 illustrates a pivotal shift. The Harper phenomenon was no longer merely historical curiosity. Institutional action, suppression of evidence, and the unexplained disappearance of serious researchers all reinforced the notion that the Harper site was dangerous, with effects that extended beyond immediate physical exposure. Morrison's work, though curtailed, preserved a critical link between Thorne's research and modern investigations, highlighting the enduring mystery and the lengths to which authorities would go to limit ACCs. By the late 1970s, the Harper case had receded from mainstream academic attention, but the mystery still attracted a small circle of dedicated researchers. One such individual was David Keller, a graduate student at the University of Tennessee who sought to document the Harper phenomenon for his master's thesis. Unlike Thorne or Morrison, Keller faced the compounded challenge of restricted access. Many primary documents had been removed from public consultation, locked in state archives, or classified as sensitive, making any comprehensive study exceedingly difficult. Nevertheless, Keller resolved to piece together the story through secondary sources, newspaper accounts, and surviving testimony. During his research, Keller discovered a troubling pattern in the historical records that had eluded previous investigators. While examining death and burial records for residents living near the Harper property between 1870 and 1920, he noted an anomalously high number of deaths officially recorded as suicides or accidental fatalities. Specifically, 27 individuals residing within a 5-mile radius of the Harper site had died under suspicious circumstances. Keller's calculations indicated that this rate was roughly 5 times higher than the regional average for comparable rural communities in Tennessee. The clustering of these fatalities, coupled with their proximity to the Harper property, suggested to Keller a potentially unexplored link between local deaths and the legacy of the Harper site. Excited by these findings, Keller prepared to expand his research, intending to explore whether the Harper phenomenon had lingering effects beyond the immediate events of 1869. His thesis advisor, Dr. Margaret Chen, found the statistical anomalies compelling and encouraged him to pursue further analysis. However, before Keller could advance his study, his work drew the attention of external authorities. 2 individuals, presenting themselves as representatives of the Tennessee Historical Commission, visited him on campus. According to Dr. Chen, these representatives explicitly cautioned Keller that his research touched on matters of state security concern and strongly advised him to abandon the topic. Though they offered no detailed explanation, the warning was unmistakable. Continued investigation of the Harper case could carry serious consequences. Faced with institutional pressure, Keller complied, abandoning his thesis on the Harper site. He redirected his research to agricultural practices in East Tennessee, completing his degree without further reference to the Harper property. In the years that followed, Keller refused to discuss the case publicly and avoided interviews, leaving his original findings largely unpublished. Yet his work preserved one critical insight. The Harper phenomenon was not merely a historical curiosity. The pattern of deaths suggested that its influence extended temporally beyond 1869, with measurable effects on those living near the site for decades. Keller's experience highlights a recurring theme in the Harper case: the suppression of information and the chilling effect it had on serious researchers. Both Thorne and Morrison had vanished under mysterious circumstances, and Keller's forced retreat reinforced the idea that proximity to the Harper site and its history carried real risk. By identifying statistical anomalies, Keller provided objective data to complement the anecdotal and paranormal reports surrounding the Harper property. His discoveries would later inform the understanding of the site's ongoing significance, linking historical patterns to contemporary accounts and suggesting that the Harper phenomenon remained active even after the physical structure had been destroyed. By the early 1980s, the Harper property had been physically leveled and legally restricted, yet the echoes of its dark history persisted. The first significant modern account emerged in March 1983, involving Thomas Waverley, a park ranger with the Cherokee National Forest. Tasked with routine patrols in the forests northeast of Elizabethton, Waverley stumbled upon a trio of hikers in visible distress roughly 2 miles from the former Harper site. The hikers, identified as Gregory Morton, David Sullivan, and Jennifer Reeves, exhibited erratic behavior, arguing incoherently about directions and staring with unrelenting terror as Waverley approached. Their reactions suggested a fear that transcended normal disorientation or fatigue. Once he managed to calm them, Waverley recorded their statements, which revealed extraordinary claims. The hikers insisted that they had heard rhythmic knocking originating from beneath the forest floor, a sound that appeared to follow them and seemed to respond to their movements. More disturbing, Jennifer Reeves reported seeing a woman standing near the remnants of an old stone foundation, dressed in antiquated 19th-century clothing. Reeves described the figure as unnervingly unnatural, with a smile that was disturbingly wrong in a way she could not explain, imitating human expression but failing entirely. Waverley's documentation captured not only the hiker's experiences but also his own unease. Intrigued and unsettled, Waverley returned to the site 3 days later to investigate. He noted an unusual silence permeating the area. Birds remained mute, insects were absent, and the forest seemed to reject the normal flow of wind and sound. At certain points he experienced the chilling sensation of being watched, though he saw no one. Waverley marked the location on patrol maps and recommended avoiding unnecessary stops in the area. However, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency treated the incident as isolated, attributing it to potential dehydration or confusion among the hikers. No further investigation was initiated. Despite the official dismissal, Waverley's account demonstrated a pattern that would recur in later incidents. Visitors in proximity to the Harper property reported auditory anomalies, specifically knocking sounds emanating from beneath the surface, as well as a profound sense of spatial disorientation. Witnesses frequently described fleeting apparitions or human-like figures consistent with Lydia Harper's historical description. Waverley's observations suggested that the effects of the Harper site were not bound by the demolition of the house or the passage of time. Rather, they remained active in subtle but measurable ways. This episode also underscored the challenges of documenting phenomena tied to the Harper property. Objective verification was complicated by environmental factors, lack of immediate corroboration, and institutional reluctance to acknowledge anything beyond natural explanations. Nevertheless, Waverley's report laid the groundwork for subsequent investigations by paranormal researchers in the late 1980s and beyond, marking the first modern encounter with the Harper site that explicitly linked sensory anomalies, psychological distress, and the lingering presence of Lydia Harper's legacy. By bridging historical tragedy with contemporary experiences, the 1983 Waverley incident reaffirmed that the Harper phenomenon was far from a static historical event. It suggested a continuity of influence that transcended generations and hinted at forces beneath the surface that defied conventional understanding. On the night of October 31, 1987, local legends of the Harper property drew a group of 5 teenagers from Carter County into the dense overgrowth that marked the long-forgotten site. Mark Patterson, 17, Lisa Henderson, 16, Robert Mallister, 17, Jennifer Yates, 16, and Thomas Bishop, 16, approached the area equipped with flashlights and a portable radio, motivated by curiosity, adolescent bravado, and the thrill of exploring a haunted location. What began as playful exploration quickly turned into an experience of profound terror, one that would leave lasting psychological effects. The teenagers initially observed little more than the overgrown remnants of stone foundations, Mark Patterson recounted in his later statement that the group joked and attempted to scare one another, unaware of the subtle tension that seemed to emanate from the ground beneath them. The first anomalous sign appeared when Lisa Henderson reported hearing knocking sounds emanating from beneath the foundation. Initially dismissed as imagination, the sounds became increasingly distinct. Robert Mallister confirmed hearing the pattern. 3 knocks, a pause, and 3 more knocks, repeating in a rhythmic cadence that seemed to respond to the group's movement. As the night progressed, the teenagers became disoriented. Paths that should have led straight to their vehicle consistently looped back to the foundation, despite careful attention to landmarks. Jennifer Yates described a sensation that the trees themselves shifted between passes, creating a labyrinthine effect in an otherwise familiar landscape. Panic began to set in as the impossibility of the situation became apparent. The group's fear intensified as the knocking grew louder and appeared to converge toward the center of the foundation, reinforcing the sense that something beneath the earth was actively observing them. Eventually, the teenagers decided to abandon their attempts to navigate conventionally. They forced themselves to walk in straight lines, relying on visual markers, until they finally reached the edge of the overgrowth and their vehicle. While they escaped immediate physical danger, the aftermath of their encounter proved far more insidious. Within days, several reported recurring nightmares featuring a woman in 19th-century clothing standing at the foot of their beds, echoing historical accounts of Lydia Harper. Lisa Henderson's parents noted episodes of her speaking in her sleep, uttering phrases in languages she could not possibly know. Linguistic experts later analyzed recordings of these episodes, identifying corrupted medieval Germanic speech patterns, further mystifying investigators and reinforcing the eerie parallels with historical phenomena linked to the Harper property. The teenagers' experience drew the attention of the Carter County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Carl Morrison recommended additional measures to secure the area, including the erection of more no trespassing signage and maintaining dense vegetation to obscure the foundation. By January 1988, the Harper site was effectively off-limits, a precautionary action acknowledging the pattern of anomalous disorientation and psychological effects that seemed to afflict those who approached the property. The 1987 incident is pivotal in understanding the Harper phenomenon because it demonstrates that even brief casual exposure to the site can induce significant cognitive and sensory disturbances. Unlike earlier historical disappearances or researcher encounters, this event involved ordinary civilians with no professional connection to the location, highlighting that the Harper property's influence is indiscriminate, persistent, and resistant to conventional explanation. The experience also reinforced the recurring motifs of underground knocking, spatial distortion, and apparitional sightings, establishing a continuity that stretches across generations and bridges historical accounts with contemporary events. In June 1995, the Harper site drew the attention of professional investigators, marking a shift from casual exploration to deliberate study. Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a clinical psychologist with a specialization in trauma, and her colleague Raymond Torres arrived at the former Harper property under the guise of a historical documentation project approved by county authorities. While officially their goal was to examine the environmental and architectural remnants, their true purpose was to investigate the persistent paranormal claims associated with the location, particularly those involving unexplained sounds, spatial anomalies, and historical apparitions. Equipped with video cameras, audio recording devices, and instruments designed to detect electromagnetic anomalies, Marsh and Torres approached the site with methodical preparation. Initial observations were consistent with historical documentation: dense overgrowth, faint stone foundations, and subtle depressions in the soil that corresponded to the former Harper root cellar. The first 2 hours of footage show the investigators performing standard measurements, noting soil variations, and carefully recording environmental conditions. Audio captured routine dialogue, indicating that both maintained professional composure and were initially skeptical of any supernatural phenomena. At approximately the 2-hour mark, Torres focused on a circular patch of less dense vegetation at the foundation's center. This roughly 15-foot diameter circle deviated from the surrounding growth and raised questions about subsurface disturbances. Marsh suggested that the irregularity might result from prior excavation or residual effects from the concrete fill placed decades earlier. Over the next hour, both investigators concentrated on this area, employing electromagnetic detection equipment that intermittently registered anomalous readings. While skeptics later argued these could be explained by natural geological features or buried metal debris, the equipment's erratic responses added to the tension of the investigation. The turning point occurred near the 4-hour mark. Both Marsh and Torres began hearing rhythmic knocking from underground, precisely following the historical pattern of 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. The sounds appeared to interact with their movements, ceasing when they approached and resuming when they remained still. Attempts to pinpoint the source with microphones produced inconsistent results, enhancing the sense that the phenomena were not bound by conventional physics. By the 5th hour, both investigators experienced severe disorientation. Trees appeared to shift, compass readings conflicted with physical landmarks, and paths that should have led back to their vehicle repeatedly returned them to the foundation. The footage captured their panic and confusion in real time, revealing genuine psychological distress. At one point, they abandoned their instruments entirely, relying solely on a straight-line path marked by visual markers to escape the looping terrain. The final segment of footage added another layer of mystery. As they departed, Torres's camera, pointed backward, recorded a figure in the distance resembling a woman in dark clothing, standing motionless near the foundation. Marsh and Torres did not observe the figure in real time, and the resolution of the footage left room for skepticism. Nevertheless, the alignment with historical descriptions of Lydia Harper suggested continuity between 19th-century reports and contemporary encounters. In the aftermath, both investigators experienced persistent nightmares and physical traces of soil matching East Tennessee limestone, despite living far from the site. These experiences, coupled with their on-site observations, reinforced the Harper property's reputation as a locus of inexplicable phenomena, where temporal, spatial, and psychological boundaries were consistently violated. In September 2018, the Harper site once again captured attention, this time from state authorities conducting a routine survey for a proposed road expansion. A 3-person crew from the Tennessee Department of Transportation, TDOT, arrived to assess the area northeast of Elizabethton, unaware that the land they were surveying had been the center of mysterious phenomena for nearly 150 years. Their task was straightforward: evaluate terrain, map the location, and provide engineering recommendations. What they encountered, however, deviated sharply from any conventional expectations. The initial stages of the survey were unremarkable. The crew navigated the densely forested area, mapping vegetation and topography with standard equipment. But as they neared the approximate location of the former Harper property, anomalies began to occur. GPS devices displayed erratic readings, shifting inexplicably within moments. Electronic measuring equipment produced errors that did not correspond with known interference or device malfunction. The crew noted these irregularities, but initially assumed them to be technical glitches or signal interference from nearby terrain features. The most disturbing and unexpected finding emerged when the team deployed ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to assess subsurface conditions. The radar revealed a large void, approximately 20 feet beneath the surface. The shape of the anomaly suggested a chamber roughly 30 feet in diameter and 12 feet in height, situated directly beneath the location of the old Harper root cellar. This discovery contradicted historical records, indicating that the cellar had been filled with concrete and rubble following the demolition of the Harper house in 1972. The readings were precise, showing a clear and consistent cavity that could not be explained by natural geological formations typical to East Tennessee. The crew attempted to document the anomaly thoroughly. Multiple scans confirmed the void's existence, but attempts to probe the space physically or with further instrumentation were inconclusive. No debris, water, or recognizable construction remained that could account for the readings. The supervisor filed a detailed report recommending further investigation before any construction work proceeded. Nevertheless, bureaucratic decisions overrode these recommendations, and the road project was ultimately cancelled due to unrelated budgetary constraints, leaving the anomaly unexamined. Later analysis by independent researchers of the GPR data noted the chamber's unusual geometry, which appeared consistent with descriptions of the original root cellar's dimensions yet extended far beyond them. Experts pointed out that such a precise void, aligned with historical foundations and completely undisturbed for decades, defied conventional engineering, archaeology, and geological expectations. The anomaly suggested either a deliberate construction hidden beneath the surface, or, as some paranormal researchers speculated, a lingering spatial distortion linked to the Harper phenomenon. In the aftermath, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation designated the surrounding area as protected wetlands. This classification was atypical. The land exhibited minimal surface water, and vegetation patterns did not correspond with traditional wetland ecology. Local historians and Harper researchers interpreted the timing and specificity of the protection as a further effort to restrict access to the site, effectively preventing any future excavation or study. As of 2024, the Harper property remains inaccessible, its secrets preserved beneath dense forest and under layers of legal and environmental barriers. The 2018 survey, coupled with recurring historical incidents, said a troubling pattern. The Harper site resists observation and interference. From disorienting visitors to producing inexplicable subsurface anomalies, the location's mysteries persist across generations. The ground beneath the former root cellar may hold remnants of events that began in 1869, awaiting discovery by those daring or foolish enough to investigate. The Harper property's influence on human perception has long been a central theme in reports spanning generations. From the earliest 19th century testimonies to modern investigations, a consistent pattern emerges. Visitors frequently experience spatial disorientation, a phenomenon where familiar landmarks become unrecognizable, compass readings become unreliable, and individuals become unable to navigate even short distances. These experiences, documented in official records and eyewitness accounts, suggest that the Harper site exhibits properties beyond normal environmental anomalies. The 1983 incident reported by Park Ranger Thomas Waverley exemplifies this phenomenon. Hikers near the former Harper property described intense confusion about directions, despite visible landmarks and clear paths. Their distress was compounded by auditory stimuli, rhythmic knocking from underground, which seemed to track their movements. Waverley's own observation of unnatural silence in the surrounding forest, where birds and insects were conspicuously absent, lent credibility to the hikers' accounts. Such sensory distortions have persisted through subsequent decades, often appearing in clusters during the autumn months, coinciding with the anniversaries of the original 1869 incident. The 1987 high school group incident further reinforced these patterns. 5 teenagers venturing onto the overgrown foundation reported hearing underground knocking, seeing shadows shift inexplicably, and repeatedly returning to the same location despite attempting to walk in straight lines. Follow-up medical evaluations indicated acute anxiety and disorientation, highlighting the tangible psychological effects of exposure to the site. Some teenagers reported recurring nightmares featuring a woman in 19th century attire, believed to be Lydia Harper, accompanied by speech in unrecognizable, possibly archaic, languages. Linguistic analysis of these episodes suggested fragments of corrupted medieval German, indicating a disturbing link between historical events and contemporary experiences. Investigators in the 1990s, including Dr. Elizabeth Marsh and Raymond Torres, documented similar effects during their 6-hour on-site study. Video and audio recordings captured not only unexplained sounds, but also sudden disorientation, where compasses and visual markers became unreliable. Both investigators later reported lingering psychological disturbances, recurring nightmares, sensations of subterranean confinement, and physical traces of dirt, whose composition matched East Tennessee limestone, despite their residence hundreds of miles away. These accounts suggest that the Harper site can extend its influence beyond immediate physical proximity, leaving lasting impressions on those who engage with it. More recent reports maintain this pattern. Visitors documenting the site through unauthorized exploration or online forums describe sudden confusion, auditory anomalies, and glimpses of figures resembling historical descriptions of Lydia Harper. While some incidents can be dismissed as exaggeration or misinterpretation, a subset aligns closely with historical records unavailable to the public, suggesting that certain observers genuinely encounter phenomena consistent with documented events. Even professional surveys, such as the 2018 TDOT investigation, experienced inexplicable equipment malfunctions and anomalies directly above the supposed location of the root cellar, reinforcing the idea that the site continues to exert measurable influence. The recurrence of these phenomena points to a localized but persistent disruption in normal perception, affecting both casual visitors and trained investigators. Those who spend extended periods near the site or engage deeply with its history often report long-term psychological effects ranging from anxiety and disorientation to nightmares and hallucinations. In extreme cases, serious researchers, including Dr. Thorne and Dr. Morrison, disappeared without explanation, suggesting that proximity to the Harper threshold carries genuine risk. The site's ongoing activity, coupled with repeated patterns of sensory distortion and spatial disorientation, establishes it as an anomaly that defies conventional environmental, psychological, and historical explanations. The Harper site, despite decades of restrictions, continues to assert a presence that transcends time. Its influence is subtle yet undeniable. Spaces warp, reality feels inconsistent, and unseen forces seem to monitor those who dare to intrude. For anyone near the former property, these consistent patterns of disorientation serve as both warning and testament. Some doors, once opened, are never entirely closed. As the Harper property faded from public access, its legend shifted from local folklore to a broader, digitally mediated phenomenon. Beginning in the mid-1990s, reports of unexplained experiences at the site began appearing on internet forums and early paranormal discussion boards, creating a virtual archive of witness testimony. Unlike earlier historical accounts, these modern narratives often included photographs, audio recordings, and video footage, though verification remained challenging. Still, the thematic consistency across decades suggested that the Harper site's influence persisted, unaffected by demolition or attempts to erase it from the landscape. One of the earliest widely circulated digital reports came from anonymous contributors who claimed to have visited the property in the late 1990s. They described experiences eerily similar to those documented by Thorne, Marsh, and Torres: rhythmic underground knocking, sudden disorientation, and the perception of figures in period clothing. Many emphasized a sensation of wrongness, a term consistently used to describe the space around the former root cellar, where light, sound, and spatial orientation behaved unpredictably. Some witnesses reported time distortions, stating that hours could pass in what felt like minutes, and vice versa, a phenomenon also noted in earlier field investigations. In 1998, a forum user posting under the pseudonym East Tennessee Watcher recounted a 3-day investigation with a small group of amateur paranormal enthusiasts. Their account included compass malfunctions, sudden temperature drops, and inexplicable shadows moving across their camp. Video footage attached to the post showed shapes that, when enhanced frame by frame, resembled human forms, but resolutions were insufficient to provide definitive identification. Despite the uncertainty, the narrative mirrored the structure of the historical accounts, reinforcing the notion that these experiences were not isolated or purely subjective. Subsequent posts on online platforms added new layers to the Harper mythos. Some contributors claimed to have heard whispering voices, often in languages they did not recognize, echoing the earlier reports of corrupted medieval German recorded in 1987. Others described physical sensations, including the sudden appearance of limestone dust or debris, even when visiting from distant locations, an apparent extension of Torres's 1995 experience. The repetition of these sensory phenomena across independent accounts lent credibility to the argument that the Harper site continues to exert an anomalous influence on visitors. While the majority of internet reports were difficult to verify, a small subset included details that aligned with archival records not publicly accessible. These included precise descriptions of the root cellar's layout, the orientation of carved symbols, and specific patterns of rhythmic knocking documented in Thorne's lost tape. Such accuracy, combined with the persistence of hallucinatory figures resembling Lydia Harper, suggested that certain modern witnesses may have genuinely encountered the residual effects of the historical phenomena. The proliferation of these reports also highlighted the impact of digital culture on folklore. Online forums amplified both real and imagined experiences, creating a feedback loop in which historical narratives influenced new accounts. Users often cross-referenced older documents, attempting to recreate investigations with varying levels of rigor. This digital preservation allowed the Harper story to survive long after the physical site was rendered inaccessible, ensuring that patterns of disorientation, auditory anomalies, and apparitional sightings remained part of the cultural consciousness. Ultimately, modern witness accounts demonstrate that the Harper phenomenon is not confined to a specific era. Across Des, from 1869 to the 21st century, individuals who venture near the site report comparable experiences, disorientation, unexplained auditory patterns, and glimpses of historical figures. Even mediated through digital platforms, the site's anomalies maintain a persistent presence, suggesting that whatever began in the Harper root cellar continues to resonate in both physical and perceptual space. The Harper site has long been associated not only with mysterious disappearances and auditory phenomena, but also with tangible psychological and physical effects on those who approach it. Across generations, witnesses consistently describe experiences of disorientation, anxiety, and perceptual distortion, suggesting a profound influence that extends beyond mere legend. These effects appear both immediate, during the time spent near the former property, and lingering, persisting weeks or even months afterward. Historical records provide the earliest documentation of psychological impact. In 1869, survivors of the initial Harper gathering reported heightened fear, hallucinations, and a sense that the boundaries between physical and spiritual reality were collapsing. While contemporary investigators often attributed these reactions to mass hysteria or stress, subsequent accounts challenge this interpretation. Researchers such as Dr. Robert Thorne in 1969 and Dr. Elizabeth Marsh in 1995 described symptoms among themselves and colleagues that went beyond ordinary anxiety, including spatial disorientation, auditory hallucinations, and a visceral sense of being observed. Spatial disorientation is perhaps the most consistently reported phenomenon. Visitors frequently describe attempts to walk away from the site only to find themselves returning to the same location repeatedly, as if the terrain itself resists departure. This effect has been reported under varied conditions: daylight, darkness, dense foliage, and cleared grounds, indicating a persistent, site-specific anomaly. Modern accounts, corroborated by video and audio evidence, suggest that this disorientation is not limited to simple confusion, but involves perceptual distortions of distance, direction, and environmental consistency. Trees, rocks, and landmarks appear to shift, creating an almost labyrinthine effect in otherwise familiar surroundings. Auditory disturbances are another hallmark of the Harper site. Multiple generations of witnesses report rhythmic knocking emanating from beneath the earth, often in patterns of 3 beats with intervening pauses. These sounds appear responsive to human movement, growing louder or fading depending on proximity and activity. In some cases, investigators have heard whispers, unintelligible speech, or voices in archaic languages, as with the teenage witnesses in 1987 who vocalized corrupted medieval German in their sleep. These auditory anomalies often trigger heightened anxiety, panic, or confusion, further compounding the psychological strain. Physical effects reported by visitors range from minor to inexplicable. Researchers and casual witnesses alike describe sudden chills, vertigo, nausea, and localized temperature fluctuations. Torres's account in 1995 of dirt appearing under his fingernails, despite being far from any soil source, illustrates the phenomenon's unusual physical manifestations. These occurrences suggest that the site affects more than perception alone, potentially interacting with the human body in ways that remain poorly understood. Long-term consequences are particularly concerning for investigators who spend extended periods studying the Harper property. Persistent nightmares, chronic anxiety, and a sense of being haunted by the site's presence are commonly reported. Thorne's disappearance in 1969 and Morrison's disappearance in 1972 exemplify the extreme risk associated with prolonged exposure. Modern psychologists reviewing these cases have noted a recurring pattern. The more methodical and prolonged the investigation, the more severe the psychological impact, suggesting a cumulative effect of the site's anomalies. The Harper site, therefore, represents a unique intersection of historical mystery and psychological hazard. Its influence is immense, immediate, perceptible, and enduring, consistently producing disorientation, auditory anomalies, and inexplicable physical effects. Both casual visitors and professional investigators report experiences that challenge conventional understanding, underscoring the danger inherent in approaching the property. The patterns observed over a span of more than a century indicate that these effects are neither coincidental nor fully explainable by environmental or psychological factors alone. By the late 20th century, the Harper site had evolved from a localized legend into a magnet for paranormal researchers and independent investigators. Its history, marked by unexplained disappearances, auditory anomalies, and persistent psychological effects, made it an irresistible subject for those seeking to understand phenomena beyond conventional science. Modern investigations brought more sophisticated equipment, detailed documentation, and structured methodologies, yet the results often reinforced the site's mysterious and dangerous reputation. The 1995 investigation, led by Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a psychologist, and Raymond Torres, a field investigator, represents one of the most meticulously documented modern encounters with the site. Granted official permission under the guise of historical documentation, the team brought video cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic sensors intended to capture anomalous activity. Initial hours were unremarkable, dominated by survey measurements, soil assessments, and environmental observations. However, the pattern of disturbance became apparent as the investigators focused on a roughly circular area of reduced vegetation, a zone coinciding with the former Harper root cellar. Here, the equipment registered unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations, though skeptics later argued these could stem from buried metallic debris or geological irregularities. The investigation took a more disconcerting turn as audio captured rhythmic knocking originating underground. Both Marsh and Torres described the sounds as responsive, pausing with movement, resuming when still, and maintaining a pattern reminiscent of previous reports. Attempts to locate the source were inconclusive. Compounding the auditory anomalies, both investigators experienced profound disorientation. Compass readings conflicted with physical perception, pathways loop unexpectedly, returning them repeatedly to the circular area. This effect mirrored reports from previous decades, from Thorne in 1969 to local teenagers in 1987, suggesting that the phenomenon transcends individual perception or environmental coincidence. Video footage later analyzed frame by frame revealed a potential sighting of a human-like figure near the foundation. Though resolution was insufficient to confirm identity, the shape and posture resembled descriptions of Lydia Harper, linking modern observations directly to historical accounts. Marsh and Torres themselves did not notice the figure during their fieldwork, emphasizing the elusive and subtle nature of visual anomalies associated with the site. The psychological aftermath was significant. Both investigators reported persistent nightmares involving subterranean stone chambers, disorientation, and unintelligible voices. Torres experienced unexplained dirt on his person, analyzed to match Tennessee limestone, despite being geographically distant from the site in his home state. These after-effects reinforced the Harper property's long-standing reputation as a source of mental and physical dislocation. Parallel efforts by amateur investigators and online researchers have continued into the 21st century. Footage, eyewitness accounts, and field reports circulate widely, often online, contributing to a decentralized archive of modern encounters. Patterns remain consistent. Visitors report rhythmic underground knocking, spatial disorientation, and fleeting glimpses of figures reminiscent of Lydia Harper. Those who engage seriously with the site often experience long-term psychological impacts, while casual or brief encounters are less likely to leave lasting effects. Modern investigations also highlight the tension between official suppression and public curiosity. County authorities, historical commissions, and environmental regulators have repeatedly restricted access, citing safety, preservation, or ecological reasons. Nevertheless, clandestine visits, often documented online, continue to corroborate historical patterns, suggesting that the Harper site remains active in ways that evade institutional control. Ultimately, modern paranormal research at the Harper site demonstrates that, despite technological advances and methodological rigor, the phenomena resist conventional explanation. The site continues to challenge assumptions about the limits of perception, the persistence of historical trauma, and the intersection between the physical and metaphysical. It remains a locus where curiosity and danger intersect, where modern witnesses confront echoes of the past that refuse to remain buried. One of the most compelling aspects of the Harper site is the consistency and recurrence of physical anomalies across generations of visitors. From the earliest survivors in 1869 to modern investigators, reports converge on a handful of phenomena: subterranean knocking, spatial disorientation, and ephemeral visual figures resembling Lydia Harper. While some incidents may be dismissed as anecdotal or psychological, the presence of measurable physical evidence complicates any purely skeptical explanation. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted as recently as 2018 revealed a significant anomaly beneath the former Harper property. Despite historical records stating that the root cellar had been filled with concrete and rubble in 1972, the GPR data indicated a large void directly below the site. The chamber measured approximately 30 feet in diameter and 12 feet in height, suggesting a space far larger than the original cellar. The nature of this cavity remains unexplained. Its persistence contradicts official claims that the site was sealed permanently, implying the possibility of ongoing subterranean structures or phenomena. Electromagnetic anomalies have been documented repeatedly by investigators such as Dr. Marsh and Raymond Torres. During their 1995 fieldwork, EMF sensors produced readings inconsistent with normal environmental interference, particularly within the circular zone of altered vegetation where the root cellar once stood. Similar anomalies were reported by earlier researchers, including Dr. Thorne in 1969, who noted a localized sensation of vertigo at the cellar's center. Audio analysis of Thorne's recordings revealed overlapping voice patterns beneath his own speech, which forensic specialists could not attribute to known artifacts or natural phenomena. These overlapping signals suggest that some activity at the site may extend beyond normal perception and capture. Soil composition and vegetation patterns also provide tangible evidence of disruption. Repeated observations note an unusually preserved circular area amid overgrowth, suggesting either prior excavation, hidden structures, or unnatural influence on plant growth. In some cases, investigators have reported finding soil samples inconsistent with surrounding geology, mirroring Torres's experience of dirt transported inexplicably to his Arizona residence. Even casual visitors report a peculiar physical sensation when stepping into the circle, a subtle hollow resonance, as though the ground itself contains a void. Historical photographs and measurements, particularly those taken by Michael Strand in 1971, reinforce the site's persistent oddities. Despite the house's decay, structural elements, including the root cellar entrance, remained unusually intact, hinting at factors beyond mere engineering. Early journals, including those of Sarah Duval and Dr. Thorne, provide corroborating observational evidence: carvings in the cellar walls, inexplicable temperature uniformity, and sounds imperceptible to all but the principal investigator. These accounts, combined with physical anomalies, suggest a complex interplay of space, sound, and psychological impact. Across the historical timeline, evidence accumulates in both subjective and objective forms. Witness testimonies, recordings, photographs, and environmental data converge to depict a site that defies conventional logic. Even when skeptics propose mundane explanations, structural acoustics, geological features, or perceptual error, the consistency across decades and the presence of measurable physical anomalies resist simple dismissal. Ultimately, the documented anomalies at the Harper property create a compelling pattern: a location where spatial rules break down, subterranean activity is recorded, and visual and auditory phenomena recur. The physical evidence suggests that the site is not only a repository of historical trauma, but also an active locus of unexplained forces. These tangible anomalies form the backbone of modern investigation and underscore the persistent danger and intrigue associated with the Harper property. The Harper property is unique not only for its historical and physical anomalies, but for the profound psychological impact reported by those who have come into proximity with the site. Across generations, visitors, from the original 1869 congregation to modern investigators, exhibit strikingly similar patterns of disorientation, anxiety, and persistent mental disturbance, suggesting that the site's influence extends beyond the immediate sensory experience. Dr. Robert Thorne's 1969 disappearance remains the most harrowing early example. His journal and tape recordings illustrate a rapid escalation from professional curiosity to intense psychological distress. While above-ground colleagues reported nothing unusual, Thorne alone experienced vertigo, auditory hallucinations, and a sense of the walls breathing within the cellar. His descent into irrational behavior, culminating in his decision to spend the night alone, demonstrates a unique susceptibility to the site's influence. Audio forensic analysis further complicates the narrative, revealing overlapping voices and tonal anomalies beneath Thorne's speech, auditory experiences that left him visibly and irreversibly shaken. Similarly, Dr. Patricia Morrison, who attempted to continue Thorne's work in 1972, vanished under circumstances eerily reminiscent of her predecessor. While direct evidence linking her disappearance to psychological factors is absent, her abrupt disappearance following a planned visit to the site raises questions about the long-term mental effects of exposure to the Harper property. Anecdotal accounts from survivors, later researchers, and casual visitors suggest a pattern. Proximity to the site seems to trigger acute disorientation, memory disruption, and heightened anxiety. More contemporary investigations provide further evidence of sustained psychological consequences. During the 1995 fieldwork, by Dr. Elizabeth Marsh and Raymond Torres, both reported severe post-investigation symptoms. Marsh described recurring dreams in which she was trapped underground, while Torres experienced physical manifestations, such as dirt appearing under his fingernails in Arizona, inexplicably matching East Tennessee limestone soil. These experiences persisted for months, illustrating that exposure to the Harper site can create enduring, inexplicable physical and psychological effects. Even minor or casual interactions appear to provoke distress. In 1983, hikers near the former Harper site reported intense fear, spatial confusion, and visions of a 19th-century woman later identified as resembling Lydia Harper. Similar accounts from teenagers in 1987 include hallucinations, compasses providing contradictory readings, and lingering anxiety symptoms that persisted well after leaving the area. These recurring reports across decades indicate that the site's effects are neither isolated nor entirely subjective. They display a remarkable consistency in pattern and intensity. Psychologists analyzing these cases have suggested several possibilities. Some attribute symptoms to heightened environmental stress, isolation, or suggestion influenced by local legend. However, the repeated consistency of experiences, coupled with measurable anomalies, such as compasses malfunctioning and GPR readings indicating subterranean voids, points to a phenomenon that transcends conventional psychological explanation. The convergence of mental, sensory, and physical effects suggests a unique environmental hazard, one that interacts with human perception, cognition, and behavior in ways not fully understood. The Harper property, therefore, emerges not only as a historical site, but as a locus of enduring psychological influence. Visitors often leave altered, temporarily or permanently, demonstrating that the site's effect is cumulative and real. Across more than a century, from Thorne to Marsh and beyond, exposure carries genuine risk, confusion, trauma, and in extreme cases, disappearance. The long-term effects documented here reinforce the necessity of respecting the Harper site as more than a historical curiosity. It is a location where human perception itself is challenged and where proximity carries consequences that can persist for years, if not a lifetime. By the 1990s, the Harper site had already gained a near-mythical status among paranormal enthusiasts, independent researchers, and online communities. Despite decades of restricted access and official discouragement, stories of the site's anomalies persisted, often resurfacing in obscure publications or whispered recollections. It was in this environment, in June 1995, that Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, a trauma psychologist, and her colleague Raymond Torres arrived at the site under the guise of a historical documentation project. Officially sanctioned, their stated goal was innocuous: survey and record the foundations and remnants of the Harper property. Unofficially, however, both had the intention of documenting the paranormal phenomena that had been reported for over a century. Equipped with audio and video recorders, electromagnetic sensors, and other instruments, Marsh and Torres meticulously documented their observations. For the first few hours, their work resembled standard archaeological or environmental field research. Measurements were taken, photographs captured, and the overgrown foundation analyzed for structural anomalies. Yet, as the day progressed, subtle irregularities began to manifest. Electromagnetic devices registered unusual readings within a 15-foot circular area near the former root cellar. Video footage captured sounds described as rhythmic knocks emanating from underground, seemingly responsive to the investigators' movements. At the same time, spatial disorientation emerged. Compasses provided contradictory directions, landmarks seemed to shift, and both investigators repeatedly found themselves returning to the same point despite careful navigation. The recorded footage quickly became controversial after it surfaced online in the late 1990s. Early internet forums dedicated to paranormal phenomena widely circulated segments of the video, leading to intense debate about its authenticity. Skeptics argued that environmental factors or equipment malfunction could explain anomalies, while proponents highlighted the precise repetition of historical patterns, the knocking, spatial confusion, and glimpses of a human-like figure consistent with Lydia Harper's description. Notably, the figure in the distance, captured for just a few seconds, appeared in the exact location that several previous witnesses had reported. This detail lent credibility to claims that the site's influence persisted, despite official measures taken to seal and demolish the original house. What followed Marsh and Torres' investigation added further weight to the phenomenon. Both reported lingering psychological effects, persistent nightmares, disorientation, and even physical anomalies such as inexplicable soil residues matching East Tennessee limestone. These effects mirrored those experienced by Thorne and Morrison decades earlier, suggesting that the Harper site continued to exert influence long after the house's destruction. Over the next few years, both investigators withdrew from public commentary. Marsh closed her practice and relocated, while Torres erased all digital traces of their work, leaving only the leaked footage to tell the story. The 1995 investigation also sparked renewed interest among amateur researchers, many of whom attempted to access the site despite official restrictions. Numerous posts on early internet platforms detailed purported encounters, but most were unverified or clearly fabricated. Yet a few reports contained information unavailable in public records, suggesting that some visitors did indeed experience genuine anomalies consistent with historical accounts. These leaks reinforced the notion that the Harper site was not merely a story, but an active phenomenon, one capable of manifesting across decades, affecting perception, and resisting containment by authorities. The Marsh and Torres case exemplifies the intersection of modern technology and historical mystery. While video and sensor data provide empirical documentation, the interpretation of these anomalies remains disputed. Nevertheless, the consistency of observed patterns, from the knocking sounds to spatial disorientation and visual anomalies, underscores a continuity that bridges the original 1869 incidents with late 20th century investigations. This continuity raises profound questions about the Harper site: how phenomena persist across time, why certain individuals are affected while others are not, and whether the mechanisms behind these occurrences can ever be understood or contained. Decades after the Harper house had been demolished and the site ostensibly sealed, the land remained quiet, at least on the surface. By 2018, modern development plans brought renewed scrutiny to the former property. A 3-person survey crew from the Tennessee Department of Transportation arrived in September to conduct preliminary assessments for a proposed road expansion. Their mission was straightforward: evaluate the terrain, map subsurface conditions, and ensure construction feasibility. What they encountered, however, would challenge conventional expectations. From the outset, the team experienced unusual equipment behavior. GPS devices fluctuated unpredictably, providing coordinates that contradicted one another, while electronic measuring tools registered sudden, unexplained errors. Initially, the crew assumed equipment malfunction, but the anomalies became impossible to ignore when ground-penetrating radar, GPR, revealed a striking feature beneath the former root cellar. According to the official report filed by the survey supervisor, the GPR data indicated a void approximately 20 feet below the surface, far exceeding the depth of any known fill material. The chamber measured roughly 30 feet in diameter and 12 feet in height, an immense space that contradicted county records stating the cellar had been filled with concrete and rubble decades prior. The implications were unsettling. The void seemed to mirror the dimensions of the original root cellar, yet no structural support or collapse evidence existed above it. Topographical maps and historical records failed to account for any natural formation that could produce such a cavity. The supervisor, noting the anomaly, recommended further investigation before proceeding with construction. However, the road expansion project was soon cancelled, ostensibly for budgetary reasons unrelated to the site's peculiarities. No follow-up GPR analysis or excavation occurred, leaving the chamber unexplored. Within weeks, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation designated the area as protected wetlands. This classification was unusual. Surface vegetation, drainage patterns, and soil composition did not meet typical wetland criteria. Public records attribute the decision to environmental protection regulations, but researchers familiar with the Harper case noted the timing with skepticism. The designation effectively prohibited future development and restricted access to the area, further isolating the site. Historians and paranormal investigators observed that this action mirrored previous patterns of state intervention. First, the sealing of archives, then demolition of the house, and now the creation of a legal barrier preventing interaction with the land. Local accounts following the designation reinforced the Harper site's reputation for strangeness. Hikers and surveyors reported anomalous silences, the absence of wildlife sounds, and subtle feelings of disorientation near the protected area. These phenomena echoed the experiences of prior visitors and investigators from Thorne to Marsh and Torres. The combination of historical incidents, modern anomalies, and deliberate restrictions created an aura of impenetrability. Any attempt to approach or examine the site risks repetition of the disorienting and potentially dangerous effects documented over 150 years. The GPR findings suggest that, despite official claims of closure and containment, the Harper phenomenon persists below ground. The void, whether natural or artificial, may serve as a locus for the repeated disturbances observed across generations. It raises critical questions. How could such a space remain undetected for decades? Does it connect to the original root cellar? And if so, why does it retain its anomalous properties? The 2018 discovery, coupled with the environmental sealing under subacentase, cause a recurring theme of containment and concealment. Authorities appear determined to restrict access, yet the site continues to influence perception and behavior, reinforcing the Harper property as a locus where historical mystery, spatial disorientation, and unexplainable phenomena intersect in a way that defies simple explanation. From the first documented gathering at the Harper House in October 1869 to the most recent surveys and restricted observations in the 21st century, a consistent pattern emerges. The Harper site is not merely haunted in the traditional sense, it is anomalous in its very spatial and psychological properties. Over 150 years, witnesses and investigators report a remarkably similar sequence of experiences. Visitors hear rhythmic knocking from underground, become disoriented even in familiar terrain, perceive figures resembling Lydia Harper, and sometimes vanish without a trace. Those who linger or investigate seriously often experience long-term psychological effects ranging from persistent nightmares to unexplained physical phenomena. The disappearances of Dr. Thorne in 1969 and Dr. Morrison in 1972, along with repeated instances of temporary confusion, reinforce the perception that proximity to the site carries genuine risk. The consistency of these reports suggests that the phenomenon is neither random nor purely psychological. Observers repeatedly describe 3 beats of knocking, disorientation around the central area of the former root cellar, and figures that resemble historical descriptions of Lydia Harper. Modern investigations from Marsh and Torres in 1995 to the 2018 GPR survey indicate that these experiences correspond to measurable anomalies. Voids beneath the surface, unusual electromagnetic readings, and areas where compasses and GPS devices fail. This intersection of subjective experience and objective anomaly presents a rare and unsettling confluence of historical mystery and contemporary scientific observation. Equally significant is the pattern of official containment. Over generations, authorities have repeatedly acted to restrict access to the Harper property. The house was boarded and demolished, archives were sealed, researchers were denied or disinverted, and the land was ultimately designated as protected wetlands. Each intervention aligns with moments of discovery or increased public attention, suggesting a deliberate effort to prevent engagement with the site. These measures do not appear to resolve the underlying anomaly. Rather, they serve to isolate it, creating both a physical and cultural barrier between the phenomenon and the wider world. For modern visitors, these patterns translate into clear warnings. The Harper site's persistent effects on spatial orientation, auditory perception, and psychological stability are well documented. Individuals reporting rhythmic knocking underground, figures in historical attire, or sensations of wrongness in otherwise ordinary terrain should exercise extreme caution. The cumulative evidence indicates that casual curiosity can escalate into serious risk. Paths traced through the former property, especially in areas near the original root cellar, can loop endlessly, reinforcing disorientation and exposing visitors to prolonged exposure to whatever force or presence remains. Ultimately, the Harper phenomenon is a case study in the intersection of history, psychology, and the unexplained. While official records attribute many events to accident, misperception, or mental instability, the long-term, repeated, and cross-generational consistency of anomalies defies conventional explanation. The site's legacy is not only its historical tragedy, the disappearance of 14 individuals in 1869, but the enduring influence it exerts on those who come near. The void beneath the surface, the persistent knocking, the figures glimpsed from the corner of the eye, and the feelings of spatial distortion together form a pattern that speaks to a reality slightly outside our own. As of today, the Harper property remains off-limits, physically sealed and legally restricted. Yet its influence persists in reports, documentation, and oral histories. The warnings left by generations of visitors, scholars, and investigators are unmistakable. Do not enter unprepared, do not investigate without caution, and recognize that the Harper threshold, once crossed, may never truly close. The echoes of Lydia Harper's presence, the subterranean void, and the anomalous spatial effects endure as a reminder that some mysteries, no matter how thoroughly suppressed or studied, refuse to be contained.